At 68 years old, Robert believed the most beautiful chapter of his life had already ended. 3 years had passed since he lost his wife, and although time moved forward, a part of him remained stuck in the past. Every morning followed the same routine. The same coffee shop, the same corner table, the same quiet silence. Life felt predictable, safe, but also lonely. Most people around him believed he was doing just fine. He smiled when he needed to. He attended family gatherings. He stayed busy with daily activities. But deep inside, Robert often wondered whether life still had any surprises waiting for him. Had love become nothing more than a memory? Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, something happened that Robert never expected. As he sat at his usual table, the coffee shop door opened. A woman walked inside. At first, she seemed like any other customer. But that simple moment would quietly change everything. Her name was Sarah. She wasn't trying to attract attention. She wasn't looking for anything special. She simply ordered her coffee and sat nearby. Yet there was something about her calm smile and gentle energy that immediately caught Robert's attention. A few days later, Sarah noticed the book Robert was reading. She smiled and asked a simple question. Robert answered politely. What began as a conversation that lasted less than a minute slowly became something neither of them expected. As the weeks passed, Robert began noticing something unusual. Every time Sarah walked through the door, her face seemed to brighten when she saw him. It was subtle, easy to miss, but it happened every single time. At first, Robert assumed she was simply being friendly. But looking back, he realized this was the first sign. Sarah always found a reason to talk to him. Sometimes it was about a book. Sometimes it was about the weather. Sometimes there was no reason at all. Day after day, the conversations continued. A few minutes became 10. 10 minutes became 30. Somehow, Sarah always seemed interested in what Robert had to say. And without realizing it, he began looking forward to seeing her every morning. One morning, while talking about childhood memories, Robert casually mentioned his favorite pie from when he was a boy. It was nothing important, just a passing memory, a small detail that most people would forget within minutes. But 2 weeks later, Sarah surprised him. As she sat down, she placed a homemade pie on the table. It was the exact pie Robert had mentioned. Suddenly, he realized something important. Sarah wasn't just listening. She was remembering. And that was the second sign. At this point, Robert still believed Sarah was simply being kind. But what happened on a rainy afternoon, just a few weeks later, would make him question everything he thought he knew about her. A few weeks later, a powerful rainstorm swept through town. The sky turned dark, and heavy rain poured down outside the coffee shop. As Robert prepared to leave, he suddenly realized he had forgotten his umbrella at home. Before Robert could step outside, Sarah quietly walked over. Without saying much, she held out an umbrella and offered it to him. Her smile was warm, simple, and sincere. "Take this," Sarah said softly. Robert looked surprised. It wasn't just the umbrella that caught his attention. It was the fact that someone cared enough to notice. The next morning, Robert returned the umbrella. He thanked Sarah and offered it back. She smiled and said, "I just didn't want you getting sick." Those simple words stayed with him all day. Over the following weeks, Robert began noticing a pattern. If he looked tired, Sarah asked if he was feeling okay. If he seemed distracted, she gently checked on him. One morning, Robert mentioned an upcoming doctor's appointment. It was just another casual conversation. He never expected Sarah to remember it. Several days later, Sarah asked how the appointment had gone. Robert was stunned. Even some family members had forgotten about it. But Sarah remembered. At that moment, Robert realized something important. Sarah wasn't simply hearing his words. She was paying attention to them. And that became the third sign. As winter approached, their friendship grew stronger. Morning coffee became a tradition. Conversations became deeper. And for the first time in years, Robert looked forward to tomorrow. Then one afternoon, Sarah casually invited Robert to a local holiday festival. It sounded like a simple invitation, but for Robert, it felt like something much bigger. And what happened there would change everything. The day of the holiday festival finally arrived. For some reason, Robert felt nervous. It had been years since he had looked forward to spending time with someone this much. When he arrived, Sarah was already there. She smiled the moment she saw him, and somehow, that smile made the entire evening feel brighter. They spent hours walking through the festival together. They laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed simple moments that felt surprisingly special. Then something happened that Robert never expected. Sarah reached for his hand as they crossed a crowded street. For a moment, neither of them said anything, but Robert felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. That night, after returning home, Robert couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. For the first time in years, he found himself smiling for no reason at all. A few days later, Robert shared the story with his daughter. He expected her to laugh. Instead, she smiled and said something he would never forget. "Dad," she said softly, "I've never seen you this happy since Mom passed away. Maybe it's time to stop being afraid and see where this leads." Those words stayed with Robert, and the more he thought about them, the more he realized something important. He wasn't afraid of loving again. He was afraid of being hurt again. The following morning, Robert arrived at the coffee shop earlier than usual. His heart raced as he waited for Sarah to arrive. When Sarah finally walked through the door, Robert stood up. His hands trembled slightly. There was something he needed to ask. "Sarah," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" She smiled. "Of course." Robert took a deep breath. "Were you waiting for me to notice?" Sarah laughed softly. Then she looked into his eyes and said, "Robert, I was beginning to think you would never ask. Sometimes love doesn't disappear with age. Sometimes it simply waits for the right moment, the right person, and the courage to begin again."